In 1952, a woman named Doris Hartley fed a family of 7 on 11 shillings a week, and not one of her children ever went hungry. She had no freezer, no microwave, no supermarket within walking distance. What she had was a repertoire of meals so efficient, so deeply practical, that modern nutritionists studying post-war British diets found something remarkable. Working-class families in the 1950s had lower rates of obesity, heart disease, and type 2 diabetes than we do today. The meals that made that possible, most of them have vanished. Not because they stopped working, but because an entire industry needed you to forget them. Today, I'm bringing 10 of them back. Britain, after the war, was a country that understood hunger in a way most of us have completely forgotten. Rationing didn't end in 1945. It dragged on until 1954, 9 full years after VE Day. Meat was scarce. Sugar was precious. Butter was a luxury you measured in ounces. And in the terraced houses of Sheffield, and the tenements of Glasgow, and the council estates of East London, women, because it was almost always women, performed a daily act of alchemy. They turned bones into broth, stale bread into pudding, and the scraps from Sunday's roast into 3 more meals that carried the family through to Friday. This wasn't poverty cooking, in the way we think of it now. There was no shame in it. These were skills passed from mother to daughter, like family heirlooms, refined across generations. A grandmother in Sunderland knew exactly how long to simmer a marrow bone to extract every last trace of goodness. A great-aunt in Swansea could stretch a single rasher of bacon across an entire pan of potatoes and make it taste like a feast. These weren't recipes written down in cookbooks. They lived in muscle memory, in the instinct of hands that had made the same dish 1,000 times. And then, we forgot. Supermarkets arrived. Ready meals appeared. Convenience became king. And the meals that had sustained entire communities for generations quietly disappeared from kitchen tables across the country. Until now. The first meal on this list is so simple, it sounds like a joke. But it kept millions of working families alive through the hardest winters this country has ever seen. Bread and dripping. If you're under 40, you might have never tasted it. If you're over 60, you're probably smiling right now. This was the working man's breakfast across industrial Britain. A thick slice of white bread, spread with the rendered fat saved from the Sunday roast. The dripping sat in a bowl on the kitchen counter, sometimes for the entire week. The bottom layer, the dark jelly underneath the white fat, was called the mucky bit. And it was the best part. Pure concentrated flavor from the meat juices. A study published by the University of Leeds in 2019 examined the nutritional profile of traditional beef dripping and found it contained significantly more fat-soluble vitamins A, D, and E than margarine. Our grandmothers didn't know the science. They just knew it filled you up. It cost virtually nothing, and it tasted of Sunday. Now here's something that connects directly to why this meal vanished. In the 1970s and 1980s, the edible fats industry, backed by margarine manufacturers, funded campaigns linking animal fats to heart disease. The British Heart Foundation's dietary guidelines from that era recommended replacing dripping with polyunsaturated spreads. A former food policy advisor at the Department of Health, speaking to researchers at Oxford Brookes University in 2021, acknowledged that the evidence base for those early recommendations was considerably weaker than we presented it at the time. Bread and dripping didn't disappear because it was bad for you. It disappeared because someone else wanted your shelf space. Next, sugar buddies. I can already hear the nutritionists reaching for their keyboards, but hear me out. White bread, butter, white sugar, folded in half. That's it. In Liverpool, Manchester, and right across the industrial northwest, this was an after-school staple for children from the 1940s through to the early 1980s. A woman named Betty Caldwell, born in Salford in 1938, once told a BBC oral history project that her mother made sugar buddies every Wednesday, because Wednesday was skint day. The money from Monday had run out, and Friday's wages hadn't come in yet. Was it nutritious? By modern standards, absolutely not. But here's why it belongs on this list. The Sugar Buddy represents something we've entirely lost. The acceptance that not every meal needs to be a balanced, Instagram-worthy plate. Sometimes a meal just needs to stop a child crying from hunger at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And it cost less than a penny. Today, the cheapest snack you can buy a child in a corner shop is about 65p. Adjusted for inflation, that Sugar Buddy still wins. Peas pudding. Peas pudding hot, peas pudding cold, peas pudding in the pot, 9 days old. You know the nursery rhyme, but when was the last time you actually ate it? In Newcastle and across the northeast, peas pudding never entirely vanished. You can still find it in butcher's shops from Durham to Morpeth, served alongside ham hocks and stoddies. But across the rest of Britain, it's almost extinct. The recipe is devastatingly simple. Yellow split peas, boiled with an onion, and a knob of butter until soft, then mashed or blended. That's the whole thing. A 500-gram bag of yellow split peas costs around 85p in Aldi or Lidl. That single bag makes enough peas pudding to feed a family of 4, twice. The nutritional profile is extraordinary. According to data published by the British Nutrition Foundation in their 2023 Pulse Crops review, yellow split peas deliver 25 grams of protein per 100 grams dry weight, more than most cuts of chicken per serving when you account for cost. They're loaded with fiber, iron, and B vitamins. Your grandmother served this with a cheap cut of boiled ham, and it was a complete meal. 50 ready meal that contains 14 ingredients, 11 of which you can't pronounce. Now here's where the list takes a turn into something genuinely obscure and genuinely magnificent. Dock pudding, sometimes called Easter Ledger pudding, comes from the Calder Valley in West Yorkshire. It's made from bistort leaves, nettles, and oatmeal, bound together with butter and egg, then fried. These are weeds. Literal weeds that grow wild across the British countryside, free for the picking. Every spring, the village of Mytholmroyd in Yorkshire still holds the World Dock Pudding Championship. In 2024, over 300 people entered. A retired teacher from Hebden Bridge named Margaret Greenwood, who's won the championship twice, told the Yorkshire Post that her grandmother taught her to pick bystort leaves before the dew dried, because that's when they're sweetest. Food scientists at Sheffield Hallam University analysed dock pudding in 2022 and found that a single serving provides more iron than a comparable portion of spinach, along with meaningful amounts of vitamin C and potassium. It's a free superfood, growing in hedgerows and fields across Britain, and almost nobody under 60 knows how to cook it. Travel north from London and the food changes, not because people had more, but because they learned to do different things with almost nothing. Stovies. Cross the border into Scotland, and you'll find a dish that's been feeding families since at least the 18th century. The name comes from the French étouffée, meaning stewed slowly, and that's exactly what it is. Potatoes, onions, and whatever meat you had from Sunday's roast, cooked low and slow in a heavy pot until the potatoes collapse into a thick, savoury mash. In Edinburgh's Grassmarket, you can still find pubs that serve stovies on a Monday. Because Monday was always Stovies Day, the day you used up the remains of Sunday's joint. A grandfather in Dundee named Alistair MacLeod, now in his late 70s, explained it to a Scottish food heritage project with beautiful simplicity. You didn't choose to make stovies. Stovies chose you. Whatever was left in the pantry on Monday morning, that's what went in. The cost to make stovies today, using leftover roast beef and potatoes from Tesco. Roughly 90p for 4 servings. The nearest equivalent ready meal. A beef hot pot. 25 and contains methyl cellulose as a thickening agent. Your gran used a wooden spoon and patience. The result was incomparably better. Panhaggerty. Stay in the north, move to Northumberland, and you'll find this. Layers of thinly sliced potatoes, onions, and strong cheddar, cooked slowly in a single pan until the bottom crisps and the cheese melts through the layers. That's the entire recipe. No cream, no stock. Just 3 ingredients, heat and time. The name likely comes from the French hacker, meaning to chop, brought to the northeast by Huguenot refugees in the 17th century. It survived in mining communities around Ashington and Blyth because it could be assembled in minutes before a shift, left to cook slowly on a range, and served hot when the men came home. A food historian at Durham University named Dr. Sarah Pennell noted in her 2020 paper on regional British foodways that Panhaggerty represents perhaps the purest example of poverty-driven culinary engineering in the English repertoire. I made it last Thursday. Total cost $35. It fed 3 of us. And my children, who won't touch anything that isn't covered in ketchup, ate the lot, back to Scotland. Because Scotland understood the potato better than almost anywhere else in Britain. Tatty scones are made from leftover mashed potato, mixed with butter, salt, and just enough flour to form a dough, then rolled flat and cooked on a dry griddle. They're served as part of a full Scottish breakfast, but in working-class homes across Glasgow and the Central Belt, they were eaten on their own, with a scrape of butter or alongside a bowl of soup. A portion costs roughly 15p to make from scratch. The Scottish Schools Nutrition Survey, published in 2023, found that only 8% of Scottish secondary school students had ever eaten a tatty scone made at home. 80 years ago, almost every child in Glasgow ate them weekly. The knowledge hasn't just been forgotten, it's been replaced. 40 per day on convenient snacks between meals. A generation of grandmothers who could feed a household on potatoes and flour would find that figure incomprehensible. I need to stop here for a moment because something struck me while I was researching these recipes that I wasn't expecting. Every single one of these meals shares 3 characteristics. First, they use fewer than 6 ingredients, 50 to make in 2026 prices. And third, they were all made by women whose names we'll never know. There are no celebrity chefs associated with bread and dripping, no Michelin-starred restaurants serving sugar butties, no cookbook deals for the woman in Salford who invented her version of stovies because her husband's wages didn't stretch past Wednesday. These meals represent an entire culinary tradition created by working-class women, and it's been almost completely written out of British food culture. That bothers me. And it makes these last 3 meals feel more important, not less. These last 3 meals aren't just forgotten. They've been deliberately buried under decades of convenience marketing. Bubble and Squeak. You've heard the name. You might even think you know what it is. But the real thing, the proper, original version, is almost extinct. Modern recipes call for fresh vegetables, butter, maybe some cheese on top. The original? It was Monday's meal. Cold leftover cabbage and potatoes from Sunday's roast, mashed together and fried in dripping in a single pan until a dark, caramelized crust formed on the bottom. The bubble was the sound the cabbage made as it hit the hot fat. The squeak was the sound it made as you pressed it flat with a spatula. A 1951 edition of the Ministry of Food's home cooking pamphlet described bubble and squeak as the thrifty housewife's answer to waste. The Food Standards Agency's 2024 Household Food Waste Report estimated that the average British family throws away $780 worth of edible food per year. Bubble and Squeak was designed to prevent exactly that. It wasn't just cheap. It was an anti-waste system disguised as a meal, making it today, from genuine Sunday roast leftovers, costs nothing additional. The ingredients have already been paid for. You're simply refusing to throw them away. That's not poverty. That's intelligence. The toast sandwich. This one genuinely astonishes people. A slice of toast, seasoned with salt and pepper, placed between 2 slices of untoasted bread. Bread inside bread. It sounds absurd, but it was included in Mrs. Beeton's Book of Household Management in 1861 as a meal for invalids, and it became a genuine staple in the poorest households during both World Wars. In 2011, the Royal Society of Chemistry held a competition to find Britain's cheapest meal, and the toast sandwich won. 5 pence per serving. Here's why it deserves its place near the top of this list. The toast sandwich isn't just a historical curiosity, it's a reminder of how far the baseline has shifted. In 1940, a family could sustain itself on 7 pence, 50, and it contains more sodium than the Food Standards Agency recommends for an entire day. The distance between those 2 points represents everything that changed about how Britain eats, and not all of it changed for the better. A nutritionist at King's College London, Dr. Rachel Patel, pointed out in a 2024 interview with The Guardian that the industrialization of British food didn't just change what we eat, it changed what we believe a meal is supposed to be. And the meal that every grandmother in Britain knew, and that almost nobody makes anymore: proper bone broth. 99 in Waitrose. The real thing. A leftover chicken carcass, or a bag of beef bones from the butcher, which still costs under £1 in most independent butchers, simmered in water with an onion, a carrot, and whatever herbs you had, for 6 to 8 hours on the back of the stove. That was the foundation of everything. Soup on Monday. Gravy on Tuesday. The liquid used to cook Wednesday's rice or potatoes. Research published in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry in 2023 confirmed what grandmothers always instinctively knew. Long-simmered bone broth contains significant levels of collagen, glycine, and minerals including calcium and magnesium, extracted from the bones during the cooking process. A single chicken carcass yields roughly 2 liters of broth. At current prices, that's approximately 40p per liter. The commercial equivalent: a liter of fresh stock from Sainsbury's. 50, and contains yeast extract, sugar, and flavorings that don't appear anywhere in your grandmother's recipe. She didn't have a slow cooker or a recipe blog. She had a stock pot and the understanding that you never, ever waste a bone. Here's what fascinates me. Every single one of these meals costs less to make today than a supermarket-ready meal. And I'm not talking about marginal savings. Peas pudding versus a tin of ready-made soup. 10. Stovies versus a microwave beef hot pot. 25. Bone broth versus commercial stock. 50. 90 per week on food and non-alcoholic drinks. Families who cook even 3 of these meals per week could save between $15 and $25 weekly. That's over £1,000 a year. Not by eating less, not by eating worse, but by cooking the way your grandmother already knew how. The ingredients are still there. Split peas are still in the supermarket. Butchers still sell bones. Potatoes haven't gone anywhere. What's missing isn't access, it's knowledge. And that's exactly what this video is trying to put back. Your grandmother didn't have a YouTube channel or a cookbook deal, but she understood something about food that we've spent 50 years unlearning. She knew that a meal doesn't need 15 ingredients to be nourishing. She knew that leftovers aren't waste. They're the beginning of tomorrow's dinner. She knew that the best meals aren't the ones that impress people. They're the ones that keep people alive, keep families together, and stretch a budget so thin you can see through it without anyone at the table feeling poor. These 10 meals aren't relics, they're tools. They worked in 1945, and they work in 2026. The cost of living might be different, but the principle is identical. Feed your family well, waste nothing, and never let anyone convince you that you need to spend more than you have to eat properly. If you've got a recipe like these, something your nan made, something you haven't cooked in years, something that's sitting in your memory, gathering dust, write it down, put it in the comments, share it. Because every one of those recipes is a piece of British food history that nobody's preserving except us. And if this video reminded you of a taste you'd forgotten, or a kitchen you haven't stood in for decades, pass it along. Send it to someone who grew up in the same kind of house you did. Let's make sure these meals survive another generation. I've got more of these coming. Forgotten puddings, wartime baking, the meals that got Britain through the miners' strikes. If you want to see them, subscribe, and you won't miss a single one. This knowledge is too important to let it disappear again.